Mike Radich here, and I'm now joined on the phone by actor James Drury. James, how are you?
Oh, I'm fine. Doing great. We're having a fine day down here in Houston, Texas, which is my home now, and it's just beautiful outside, so we're enjoying it.
James, today we're going to be talking about your acting career. We're going to focus mainly on The Virginian and other Western TV shows and movies you made over the course of your career. But before we do that, give us the update. How's your wife feeling? A lot of people have been praying for her. A lot of people are hoping that she's doing well. Give us the update. How is she feeling right now?
Well, she's doing fine, basically, under the circumstances. She has a condition where she's got a deterioration in the brain cells in her cerebellum, which is in the back of the brain and controls all the motor functions of her body. So she's had a lot of difficulty with her balance and her ability to walk and so forth. She's basically wheelchair bound most of the time now, but we do get her up and get her standing, and we have to, of course, get her into the bath and all that. So we have a lot of wonderful help here. We've got some people that come and give her physical therapy and speech therapy, and then she has a lady that comes and takes her and bathes her 3 times a week. So she's got a lot of help, but the condition is just such that it requires a lot of hands-on care 24/7. She's got to have things, and she can't really fend for herself or fetch anything for herself. So that's why I'm off the road and here for the foreseeable future until such time as maybe she'll make some improvements and we can I can do some public appearance dates, but I don't see that happening on a generalized basis for some time to come. So I'm pretty well here for the duration, and we're just getting along fine and doing everything we have to do. At this age, life becomes kind of a one long doctor's appointment. You know, you have to see this specialist and that specialist about various different things. So we keep on a schedule and keep doing that, and just doing the best we can. That's all we can do. But I deeply appreciate all the kind thoughts from all the fans and people in general out there who have been praying for her and sending good thoughts our way. And I know it's a very valuable thing to do. So please, folks, keep it up. It's something that hardens us both every day, and I know it's helpful. And I can't stress that enough. Mm-hmm. Anyway. That's about all I can tell you without getting into a lot of gory specifics, and that's not what you really want to hear, I don't think. But she is doing fine, and she's in got great good spirits, and that's the most important part. So we'll keep going.
On April 22nd through the 24th, there's an event called Cowboy Up for Vets. Are you telling me that you're not going to be able to attend that event?
Oh, no. I'm planning to be there in Swanton this year. What I meant was that's the only event I have scheduled this year, and probably will be the only one I'll be going to. I'll have to be gone from here, from Houston, for 9 days, and we've made arrangements to have professional help come in here 24/7 to take care of her while I'm gone. So we'll make that effort, and I think everything will be fine, and we'll do that. But I just thought, in general, before my wife got so sick and so needful of my presence, I was able to stay on the road about 40,000 miles a year. I was going everywhere, all over the country, and meeting the fans, and they're terribly gracious and helpful out there. But I just had to curtail everything because of her needs and the fact that nobody takes care of her the way I do. So that's just the way of it. We have had a wonderful 36-year marriage, and we're fulfilling all the obligations we have under that, and going forward. And I want to be here for her, and I am here for her. So that's why we kept can't do anything more. But the event in Swanton is going to be quite a blowout. We've got 9 people coming from the cast, and that's more than we've ever had in a reunion before. And so I'm really looking forward to it, and I hope that people can find their way up to Swanton and come and see us.
Because you took off all of 2015 taking care of your wife, how excited are you to get back out on the road in 2016 and meet your fans and have a reunion with cast members from the Virginian? How excited are you to get back out on the road?
I certainly will savor the excitement that I have up there, because, as I say, I won't be going anywhere else this year. And it's always great to get out and meet the people. And of course, we have what we call the Virginian Posse, which is kind of the fan club, and that has been increasing in membership for quite some time, and it's just snowballing now. We've got a lot of people that are into the Virginian Posse and our members, and follow all the activities all the time. And so it's going to be great to be out there and actually meet and greet those people and give them some encouragement. You know, that's the basic reason we do public appearances is because we want to give people encouragement, and of course it encourages us in turn. And that's why it's so much fun and so gratifying. So, but the main thing that I want to stress is that we're really raising funds for veterans' families, and there's a lot of veterans' families, as you know from the newspaper, that are in financial trouble or are financially needy. They have bills that can't be met and mortgage payments they can't make and things like that. And we've been able to help a lot of families up in Ohio with over the years with Cowboy Up for Vets. And I'm sure this year will be bigger and better than ever, and we'll raise more money than ever to apply to that fund. So it's great. It's great news all the way around.
When you go to events like Cowboy Up for Vets or film festivals or other conventions, events like that, and you get around people who are fans of your work and know your work, is the main thing they always bring up, is it always the Virginian? When you get around your fans, are they always like, oh, I know you're the Virginian? Is it always the Virginian when you get around your fans, or do some of your fans bring up other work that you did over the course of your career? Because you have a great body of work. I've seen a lot of your stuff, and a lot of it is very, very impressive. So is it always the Virginian when you get around your fans? Is the Virginian mostly what they talk about, or do they add in other work that you did?
People remember and remark on my acting career in all of its aspects. I did do a lot of different things besides the Virginian, but nothing to the extent that I did the Virginian. And after all, it was 9 years and 246 or 41 or whatever it is episodes that they admit to. So that's an awful lot of film, and it made a tremendous impact. But I appeared in other television series, and I did a number of movies, and was involved in a lot of really important projects before the Virginian started, and a few afterwards. I really enjoy remembering about my involvement with Ride the High Country, which was a Sam Peckinpah picture that's become kind of a classic Western. They show it on television every day someplace, and people often remark about that and that performance, in which I played the lead heavy. So there's just a lot to talk about, because my career did span a lot of time and a lot of different projects. And I, of course, I'm 81 now. By the time we get to Swanton, I'll be 82. I'll be 82 in April, and I am always heartened by the fact that Sir John Gielgud was working as an actor when he was 97. So maybe I can get a job here or there before I attain that age, if I'm lucky enough to get there, and I sure hope so. I really would love to do some more acting, but it's the parts that I would be suitable for are few and far between, and I have had very little luck getting a job here lately, but hope springs eternal, and you never know when something will come up. And I'm certainly prepared to go back to work anytime I can find something to do that I think is viable for me, you know.
You're probably not familiar with the website IMDb, but on your profile it says you're best known for, obviously, The Virginian, then Ride the High Country, Pollyanna, and Forbidden Planet. Those are the four things they say you're best known for. Does that sound about right? Would you say that those are the main things you're remembered for?
We've had a couple of occasions in the past to go to film festivals that were devoted to Forbidden Planet, because as you know, the science fiction fans are legion. They're everywhere, and they have these great successful comic cons that they have around the country in various major cities, where all the science fiction characters come, and the fans dress up as Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker and all the different science fiction characters that have been around, and I don't get invited to those because Forbidden Planet is not celebrated that much in those places, but I have been to festivals where Forbidden Planet was the main subject matter, and those places we've had some reunions where Anne Francis has come, and some of the other characters that we've had in the show. A lot of those people have passed away, unfortunately. That movie was made in 1954 when I was 20 years old, and I was one of the characters in the film that got killed by the invisible monster. The other one was my friend Bob Dix, who is now semi-retired and lives in Benson, Arizona, and I talk to him all the time, and by golly, he just got an acting part playing Dr. Frankenstein in a Frankenstein movie shooting in upstate New York. So he's off for a 9-day run in that thing, and I'm very happy for him to be working, and he's always worked and kept himself active in the business, and he's a wonderful guy. He's the son of Richard Dix, who was a great leading man and movie star from the 1930s, as you may remember, or as you may have seen some Richard Dix pictures down through the years. But anyway, Bob and I talk quite often, and I really enjoy getting together with him and reminiscing about Forbidden Planet. We really enjoyed being in that picture. That was a groundbreaking science fiction picture, and I got to pick up my cat here. She wants to get on the bed. There you go. George Lucas, I believe, in an interview one time said that Forbidden Planet was quite an inspiration for him when he started making the Star Wars series. So that's something we were always very flattered to hear that, you know. At the time, they spent, I think, $5 million on that picture in 1954, which would be like $100 million budget now, you know. So it was an expensive picture, but of course they made a lot of money for it, because it's still showing, again, like Ride the High Country, they show it somewhere every day.
Just curious, because I'm 22 years old, I was born in the 90s. How often do you meet fans that are being exposed to the Virginian and some of this other stuff that you've done over your career for the first time? How often do you meet young people when you go out to conventions and festivals and all that kind of stuff?
Well, it's quite often, because the show has been on the air constantly now for the last, I guess, 6 or 7 years. We had it was on Encore Western Division for, I think, 2 years, and then INSP picked it up, and they've had it on the air for about 4 years, I think, and they're continuing to run it. It runs every Friday and Saturday, and a lot of young people and teenagers and kids of all ages have discovered the show, and I have grandfathers writing me and saying, you know, and I'm a grandfather, writing me and saying that their grandkids are watching the show without being asked to watch it and without being told to watch it. They just see it and sit down and like it and watch it. So that's very, very gratifying, because the lessons that are told, that are taught by in Western cinema and Western television, are lessons that are not really being taught that much anymore anywhere else. And when I say lessons, I mean simply the fact that every Western is a morality play. It has to show the triumph of good over evil. and we consistently and constantly do that in westerns and in all sorts of heroic drama. But westerns in particular are devoted to that principle, and it's something that people really enjoy, watching the bad guy get his comeuppance. And we certainly have enough bad guys in our daily life that we would like to see them get their just desserts, And I think the public responds to that very forcibly because of the present situation where we have so much tension and so many problems in the world with people trying to hurt other people and take them down. The mass shootings and all that are something that worries everybody. I mean, you see a western, you see the bad guys get their comeuppance, and that's something that people enjoy and get a catharsis from. So that's why westerns are so entertaining.
Don't get me wrong, I'm a big fan of the Virginian. I'm as big of a fan of the Virginian as anyone else, but how I became a fan of yours is through the westerns that you did pre the Virginian. Obviously, I'm a fan of the Virginian, but it was the western TV series that you did before that really sucked me in, and that's how I became a fan of yours. You had some great performances on some of the best western TV shows of that time. You had a great performance in an episode of The Rebel called Vindication, where you played a blind ex-army captain. You really, really shined in that episode. You outshined Nick Adams, who was Johnny Yuma, the Rebel, on that show. You had a fantastic performance in that particular episode. Then you had a great performance in an episode of The Rifleman with Chuck Connors and Johnny Crawford. You played a guy named Spicer in an episode, and you had a fantastic performance in that episode as well. You had all these great performances. You had a great performance in an episode of Rawhide. That episode that you were in is actually one of my top 5 favorite episodes of Rawhide. You had a great performance. You were playing Patricia Medina's boyfriend, who wasn't really a great guy. He had a hidden agenda. Then you had a fantastic performance in an episode of Have Gun Will Travel, the only episode you appeared in on Have Gun Will Travel. And again, you were completely outshining Richard Boone, and Bob Wilkie was in that episode with you. And I remember watching these shows and being like, who is this guy? This guy is a great actor. How come he doesn't have a show? And now, obviously, since I was born in the 90s, I'm having to come from the future and look back to the past. And that's how I found out about the Virginian. I kept enjoying you on all these great Western TV series pre-Virginian. Then when I found out you had your own show, that's how I jumped in to watching the Virginian. It was those shows that you were doing pre the Virginian that really got me to becoming a fan of yours, and then it just went on from there, and I've been a fan ever since. But it was those shows like Gunsmoke, The Rifleman, Rawhide, Wagon Train, Cheyenne, Death Valley Days, Broken Arrow, Bronco, Have Gun Will Travel, Lawman, and others. So I'm just curious, 2-part question. First part, what was your favorite Western TV series pre the Virginian to be on? And second part of the question, what was your favorite character you played on shows like I just mentioned? What was your favorite character, and what was your favorite show to be on?
Well, I just absolutely love being in all of them. I enjoyed them, and I certainly learned something every time I went out with a Western. And I worked with some great directors, including Sam Peckinpah, but a lot of great television directors, Abner Biberman and Don McDougall, and a long list of great directors, some of whose names I can't even remember anymore, but they were established motion picture directors when they came to television, so they knew how to put a picture together and make it effective. And I learned a great deal, and I try to learn something every time I act and increase my knowledge. It's a wonderful thing. But it's good that you mentioned The Lawman with John Russell and Peter Brown.
Mm-hmm.
We did a segment of that I've always been extremely fond of, because it was perfect in its own way. It was a high noon type situation where John Russell was threatened by a bunch of bad guys that had been in prison and were due to get out and were going to come back to his town and take revenge on him for putting them away in prison for the first place. And he realized that this was happening, and you see him sending a telegram. And then you see a guy in a bar room with a couple of barroom girls and having a great time and partying and drinking it up. And he gets this telegram, and he leaves and jumps on his horse and starts riding. And you see him going uphill and down dale and uphill and down dale for a long time towards the beginning of the show. Remember, this was a half-hour show now, so all these things are happening in a 26 or 25-minute period, and we see this horseman riding and riding and riding, and finally it comes the day of the big confrontation, the big high noon in the Western Street, and the bad guys show up and start after John Russell, and this fellow that's been riding gets wounded in the first skirmish, and then he's very instrumental at the end. He comes out with a shotgun and knocks off a guy that's about to shoot John Russell in the back, and is killed and lies in the street. And Russell picks him up in his arms and carries him across to the office. And Peter Brown says, "Who was he, mister? True?" And he says after a long pause, "He was my brother." And it always brings tears to my eyes when I think about it, because at that time and at that place and on that day, nobody could have done it better. It was perfection itself in the way the little 30-minute segment played out. And I've always remembered that as a perfect piece of film that I was lucky enough to be there and participate in. So it's a very, very fond memory. I have fond memories of all of my Westerns, but that one was just had a perfection to it that is memorable to this day. And I'm really glad I was there. Let's put it that way.
Just curious, because you're going from show to show to show, obviously Westerns had taken over television at that point in time, so there were all these different Western series going on simultaneously, a bunch in prime time, and there's all these different shows. I'm really interested in knowing, how were you getting all these roles? Did you have to audition for these roles? Was there time to audition? Like how would they hire you from, let's say The Rifleman? Like, how would you get a role on that show, or whatever show it was? It doesn't have to be that one. Just how would they hire you?
Nowadays, whenever an actor goes up for a part of any kind in television or motion pictures, it's almost imperative that no matter who they are, that they read for the producer and director. In other words, give an approximation of what they'd sound like saying the lines, and that is, to my way of thinking, a poor way to make a selection, because after all, it takes a long time to put a character together and make it effective, and you're asked to do all that in a 15 or 20 minute period, having just seen the script, usually without most times without even knowing what the whole story's about. They just give you what they call sides, which are sheets of paper with your lines on them, and you don't really have a concept of how they fit into the show with any exactitude. And so I dislike that method very much, but I certainly have read for a lot of roles, and in those days, lots of times you just got the part on your reputation. Somebody would call up and say, "Is Jim Drury available for this role? Is starting Monday or starting Wednesday or starting Thursday or whatever it is?" And if I was available, my agent would make the deal, and we'd go ahead and show up and do the part, and didn't have to read for a lot of those things, but for a lot of them we did. And as a matter of fact, with the Virginian, I had to do 3 screen tests for it, full-fledged screen tests, not readings, where you had the sets and the lighting and the costumes and the other actors to work with, and you put scenes together with different actors, and they saw how you looked from different angles. And their main response to me, the first time I did a screen test, they said, "You're too fat. Lose some weight." So I went and lost about 10 pounds and came back, and they said, "You're too fat. lose some weight. So I lost 30 pounds in 30 days. And finally, on the Friday night before the Monday morning we started to shoot, Doug McClure and I were informed that we had the parts of the Virginian and Trampus. And so we had the weekend to think about it, and then go into production, and we kept working for 9 straight years. We were able to do that show without a pilot because of the magic of Lee J. Cobb's name. He was signed for the show, and he was playing the ranch owner, and as a result, we were able to. NBC bought the series without a pilot, so we went right into production, which was a great blessing because we didn't have to do a pilot and then had everybody pick it apart and then go back and try to do something different. They figured if we had Lee J. Cobb, we had it made. So he was a great help in getting us into that situation. And, of course, he was wonderful in the series. He only stayed for the first 3 years, but he was great to work with, and we all enjoyed having a chance to interact with such a prestigious actor. And he was certainly that. And a great friend, so we just loved him, but he didn't care for the show very much. He once gave an interview where he said, if I had the money, I'd buy up all this film and make banjo picks out of it. So he had a low opinion of the series, but he should have, instead of criticizing it, he should have watched it because it certainly set him off to great effect, and the entire show had a majesty to it that I don't think he could deny at this point. So we were very happy to have had him, but I wish we'd have had him for longer. You know what I mean?
Right. Speaking of how you got the part of the Virginian, I'm just curious, do you know who you beat out for the role? And if so, who were some of the names of the guys who were up for the part, if you do know?
I really don't know. I understood that there were 75 different actors who auditioned for the role. So whoever they were, apparently I was chosen over them, and I was and am eternally grateful for that. I think I probably have some sworn enemies even now in Hollywood of guys who would wanted to get the part and didn't get it. And of course, the Virginian has been played by many different people before I started doing it on television. Gary Cooper did a version of the Virginian. Joel McRae did a version of the Virginian. And when it was in the silent film days, I believe William S. Hart and Dustin Farnham both had versions of the Virginian. And then there's been Bill Pullman made a picture of it, a motion picture of it a few years ago for television up in Canada, and I had a little vignette in that, a little guest star part, and I believe Trace Atkins, the country western singer, has made a version of the Virginian as well. But I'm the only one that ever did it on television, and that's why it got such, that's why I became so identified with the role, because television reaches a lot more people than a motion picture does, as we all know. And of course, it also overexposes everything it shows, and that we also know. And as a result, I have had a difficult time since then getting a role that wasn't a copy or a clone of the Virginian, or for some reason producers look at me and they don't see anybody but the guy in the black hat. And my capabilities are much more broad than that. I've had a lot of training in the classical theater, and I've done many Shakespearean roles, and was able to work in a lot of comedy and different types of material in the theater, both during and after the Virginian, and I enjoyed that very much, but I was never able to do that on film. So it's I consider it to be unfortunate, but then that's an actor's life, and I wouldn't trade having played the Virginian for anything. So everything in life is a trade-off. You get to enjoy one part of it and not enjoy another part of it so much, but that's life. It happens to everybody, and we're all lucky to be able to get through it and have some joy along the way. So that's my philosophy anyway.
If you didn't get the part of the Virginian, What do you think would have happened to your career? What would you have done?
Oh, God knows. God knows. No, I have no clue, because anything could have happened. I could have. I might have gone along just working as an actor and doing episodic television for the rest of my life. And I might have gotten another series of some sort that would have been very viable, but the way it worked out was the way it worked out, and I couldn't predict what would have happened if it hadn't worked out, because that would have been a whole other life.
Right.
That would have been a whole other lifetime.
Right.
So now we're over 50 years past where we started the Virginian in 1962, and 2012 we had our first big reunion, and now it's 2015 and we're having the biggest of all. So it's been a tribute to the fans that have supported the show in its various television showings recently on Encore and INSP, it's the Inspiration Channel, and we're just delighted that it's still on the air. When it's on the air, people just clamor to see me at all these different venues around the country, and of course when it's off the air, you're subject to the fickleness of memory, and they don't have it in front of them, so sometimes they don't think about it so much. So it's certainly that's a question I just don't have an answer for. I'm sorry, Mike.
Okay.
I wouldn't have any idea what would have happened if I hadn't done it.
Right.
But I did do it, and I'm glad I did.
In real life, how are you similar and how are you different from the Virginian?
Well, I'm certainly that book was published in 1902, and in 2002, of course, I was way past having done the Virginian, but in that 100 years, we're all completely different people than we would have been then. Mm-hmm. But the character that I tried to create and do consistently and keep consistently in mind was that of a working cowboy, and I also used a great many elements from my maternal grandfather. His name was John Hezekiah Crawford, and he was a Western pioneer. He was born in Kentucky and raised in Missouri, and came west with a wagon train when he was 16 or 17 years old, and settled in Oregon and became one of the Oregon pioneers. And he, at my grandfather's knee, I learned about the Indian fights and the wagon trains and the exodus across the country, and so I had all of that knowledge transferred to me, and then he taught me how to take care of a horse and ride a horse, and got me into. First time I got on horseback, well, I was in diapers on one of his big Belgian plow horses, and I remember it well. My legs stuck out straight out in both directions because that horse's back was about 3 feet across, and I was still in diapers. I was 2 or 3 years old. And I remember I stayed up there all day. I would never wanted to come down. I loved it so much being up on that horse. So that's one of my earliest memories. And I attribute all my Western knowledge and my survival knowledge and my cowboy knowledge to my grandfather, who had been a cowboy and a working rancher and a wagon train member, and had lived the story of the West. So he imparted it to me, and I took a lot of his character traits and incorporated them into the portrayal of the Virginian, mm-hmm. and that's how I put it together. Mm-hmm. So it's part me and part Grandpa and part all the Western heroes that I'd had a chance to study, and a lot of the Western heroes that I'd had a chance to work with, including Joel McRae and Randolph Scott. Mm-hmm. From Ride the High Country, mm-hmm. which I appeared in, incidentally, in the same year we started the Virginian, which was 1962. So that's it's been 50 years ago, and I'm still pitching myself at how lucky I got to be in that picture and work with those great actors.
During the entire run of the show, the Virginian never had a name. He was just known on the show as the Virginian. Did you like that? Did you like that mystery?
I thought that was great. It was a dramatic device that Owen Wister used in the book. He never gave the character a name in the book, and we retained that, and it gives the character an aura of mystery when he enters a room. People say behind their hand, there's the Virginian over there. Well, when you have somebody talking about you like that, it gives you an aura of mystery and makes you the center of attention, and that's a great thing for a leading man. It's something that the actor doesn't have to do anything to achieve. He just shows up, and they call him the Virginian. Mm-hmm. So I really always enjoyed that aspect of it, and thought it was a wonderful dramatic device, mm-hmm. and it is and was, and it's wholly the invention of the original author, Owen Wister. Mm-hmm. And so I'm very grateful to him for that.
Mm-hmm. It bothers some people that they never knew what your name was on that show, but I kind of like it. I'm with you. I kind of like it. And also, Jock Mahoney, when he was the range rider, he was just the range rider. They never gave him a name, so I think it works perfectly. But what's the Virginian's name? Do you know? You got to know. Tell me. Now's the perfect time.
No, but
Tell
it's
me.
A secret.
Tell me.
It's a secret. I can't tell you. It's classified.
But you know. But you know the name.
Neither confirm nor deny that the Virginian never had a name. Of course, he never had a name. If we follow Owen Wister, he still doesn't have a name, and the
Right.
Virginian wouldn't know it either, except that he would. But I never gave him a name, and on one segment, if I'm not mistaken, Doug McClure called me Jim, mm-hmm. and they left it in the picture, but it was just one little shot where we were riding out of town. He said that just accidentally, and I think they left it in. But I hasten to add that Virginia's name is not Jim. That was just an alias he was using. So
okay.
We'll leave it at that.
Okay, sounds good. Sounds good. How long did it take to make an episode of that show? Because during the time you guys are filming, you're filming 4 or 5 episodes all at the same time. You're doing one shot over here for one episode, then you're riding by horseback if the horse was needed to do another shot for a totally different episode. Then if you don't need the horse, you're driving by limousine to it again, a different shot that has nothing to do with the previous 2 episodes and the previous 2 setups that you just shot. So you're doing all these episodes for the show simultaneously. So how long did it take to make a single episode of the show?
Well, we did them, almost all of them, in 8 days. They did a few of them in 7, and they wanted to do them all in 7, and I put my foot down and said, no, we're going to take 8 days. And nowadays, they take 10 days to make an hour show. So what we did in 8 days was truly miraculous, and was just, in fact, logistically, you couldn't do the Virginian, but we never got that memo. Mm-hmm. So we went ahead and did it anyway, and I enjoyed every minute of it. It was a great challenge and a great feeling of satisfaction at the end of the day. If I'd been in 5 episodes and done them all right, I knew I'd done something well. So that's all you can take home with you is knowing you've done a good performance, and I tried desperately to make that happen every day I worked. Mm-hmm. So that's what you have to do. You have to stay after it and make sure that you're getting the most out of the part and giving the most to the part that you can possibly bring to it. You have to bring to it everything that you've ever known and ever will know, and that's what we did, and we did it handsomely. And I certainly didn't do it alone. I had all these wonderful members of the permanent cast, and in particular Doug McClure, to back me up, and it was a group effort and certainly an ensemble piece, and I just loved being a part of it, and did my best to support everyone else that was in it at the same time.
Before you were hired to play the Virginian, did you know what you were getting yourself into? Did you know that you would have to be doing multiple episodes at the same time? And did you know about the 90-minute format, or was that something that they dropped on you after you were already hired?
No, I knew about the 90-minute format. In fact, I had done a half-an-hour version of the Virginian for Screen Gems, Columbia Pictures.
Right.
about 3 years before I was hired to do the 90-minute version. So I was familiar with the role and the part to some extent, and I expanded on it for the 90-minute version and refined it. But basically, the Virginian character is the same no matter what the format. But the 90-minute format did not worry me that much. I have had and have probably 3 or 4 times the energy of most people, and I was not deterred by that at all. And Doug McClure was the same way. He had boundless energy and could work long hours, and then show up and work long hours the next day and never do anything but smile. And of course, anytime Doug walked into a room, everybody smiled. There was something about him. He just couldn't help it. So we didn't have any problem with that. I think it would probably it might have scared a lot of people, but it sure didn't scare us, and we were just happy to have the work and be able to do it and get through it and make it good enough to last. And apparently, obviously, it has lasted. So,
right.
we should be justifiably proud of that, and I am.
With all this stuff going on and you're filming 4 or 5 different episodes all at the same time, how were you able to memorize the dialogue, and how were you able to make it all look so good when you don't have a lot of time to figure out what's going on and prepare and rehearse for the different scenes that you were performing in? How were you able to get all the stuff down and make it look so good?
If I have any really important gift, it's my gift of memory. I'm able to look at a 10-page scene and then look at it again and then shoot it with no mistakes. I just have a photographic memory for dialogue. A lot of the time I can't remember my own phone number, but I sure can remember. I can remember lines of plays I was in 60 years ago that I'd rather forget. But if someone says a line from the play, and I will go on and I will know everybody's lines till the end of the show. Mm-hmm. So that's just the way my mind is constructed. And it's a great gift, and it was certainly an enormous help when we did the Virginian, because I could keep these parts straight and these various situations straight in my head and create the illusion of reality. You know, that's the definition of acting. The formal definition is we create the illusion of reality when we act. Mm-hmm. And I was able to do that. So I can attribute my photographic memory for dialogue to that gift that God gave me, and I was able to utilize it and make the most of it.
Mm-hmm. Where was the show filmed at? Was it all on location, or were there some setups on the back lot or stages?
Well, we used sound stages all over Universal Studios. Mm-hmm. We had all our interiors were in sound stages, you know, the insides of the buildings, and then the outdoors, the exterior shots we shot on the back lot and on distant locations all over Southern California. We went to the Mojave Desert, we went to the mountains, and we went to the sea, and we went everywhere. So that was how we operated. And that's why the motion picture business is in Southern California, because you have such a great variety of terrain that you can reach within an hour or an hour and a half automobile drive, and you're there in a completely different terrain than where you left from. You know, you can see all that different types of terrain in Southern California, and that's one of the few places you could find everything within an hour's drive. That's why the picture business started there, and it started in the east, but it came to the west and settled there because the locations were so easy to get to. And then, of course, a lot of the big motion pictures and so forth were shot in Monument Valley, all the way, the John Ford Wayne pictures in Monument Valley and in southern Utah and all over Arizona and Wyoming and Montana, all the western states. But the bulk of everything was shot in Southern California. So that's just the geography that we were blessed to have down there, and that's why the picture business was there, and it's still there.
Where's the Shiloh Ranch located at? Or where was it?
It was on the back lot at Universal, and it has been deconstructed now and is being used for, I think, a parking lot for the Universal City Studio Tour. But we had it there right over a big earthen dam, like a big berm, built at one end of the ranch, and right on the other side of that was the Hollywood Freeway. So in the summertime in August, when it got to be 120 degrees and the smog from the Hollywood Freeway was in there, you couldn't see from the bunkhouse to the barn half the time. But we managed to make it look like it was Wyoming, and that was the main thing. It's all a trick done by illusion. What was it like riding your horse, Joe D? Well, it was wonderful. We were extremely well suited to each other. He was a push-button horse. He would do anything you asked him to do, and then he'd stand still in the close-up, which is what you want. Originally, they gave me a horse that I could ride it at top speed and chase all over the place, but I couldn't get him to stand still when we came into a close-up. So we had to replace him, and Del Combs, the head wrangler on the show, brought me this horse, which he owned and continued to own throughout the show. And I got on him and just loved him. And he and I, of course, were together on a daily basis for 8 years. And then in the 9th year, I changed horses and had another really good Appaloosa horse that Del Combs brought for me. And we called him Sam. And I used him during the final year of the show when they called it the Men from Shiloh. So I was very lucky with the horses I was given to ride, and as I said, I'd been on horseback since I was in diapers, so I had the skills, and I was able to be very effective with both those horses, and I enjoy every minute I'm on a horse. To me, it's as natural to me as breathing because I've been doing it for so long. And when I moved to Texas, I got into some very precision horsemanship and started playing polo and riding cutting horses and reining horses. And I attribute a lot of my success in that to the fact that I came back from a polo match in the Dominican Republic where the Dallas Ladies Polo Club had asked me to go down there and play in a polo match for charity. And I did, and of course I had never played polo, and they said, well, they were going to teach me, and they didn't teach me a damn thing. They just gave me a hard hat and the tall boots in the court and said, get on that thoroughbred and go play polo. And I did, and I could handle the horse all right, but I couldn't get anywhere near the ball. So I came home and got myself a dressage coach, a little Austrian named Paul Cotton. It was probably 90 pounds dripping wet. And he put me in a sitting trot for 45 minutes a day for 9 months. And I got so close to the horse and in such harmony with the horse that I began to be able to get my horse to the ball and hit the ball and be able to ride cutting horses effectively and reining horses effectively. And I've got a drawer full of belt buckles to prove it. So my horsemanship improved immensely when I moved to Texas. But when you see me on the Virginian, I'm just a guy who's been on horseback since he was in diapers, so I'm not really as trained as I have become. But that's all part of it. You just get more refinement as you go along, and you get more harmony. And what you want is harmony with your horse, with every part of your horse. Wherever he places a foot, you want to know that it's going there before it happens. And it sounds complicated, but the more you do it, the easier it is. When was the last time you rode a horse? Oh, it's been 6 or 7 years now. I have not been able to get on horseback because I have a severe sciatica condition in my right leg. And when I get on a horse, it's just so painful I have to get right off. So I've got a bad back, and it pinches on the nerve, and the sciatic nerve is the longest nerve in the body, as you probably know. It goes from the small of the back all the way to the foot on both sides, both legs. And I had it in my left side, and I got a chiropractor who was able to cure that, and it has not come back. But then it went on to my right side, and that's when it's gotten really painful, and we have not been able to make a whole lot of progress with that. So right now I'm afoot, but I'd like to get my back fixed and my hip fixed and be able to get back on a horse, and maybe one of these days I will. It's a great, great desire of mine to be able to horseback again. But right now, it's just too painful to do it.
Just curious, before this happened to you, in your later years after the show had ended and you were riding on a horse, did the theme music to the Virginian ever pop into your head when you were riding?
No. Well, I can't say that it didn't. I'm sure I've thought of it from time to time, but that's a very difficult instrumental piece by Percy Faith, and I start out with 2 strikes against me. I can't carry a tune and I can't sing. So the only guy I know who can do the Virginian effectively, the only civilian, I say civilian, who doesn't work in the motion picture business, who can approximate it, is my foot doctor here in Houston, Dr. Robert Parker. And you call him up on the phone, and he'll hum the music to you and get it right every time. So he's got a great sense of music. And my wife, who has perfect pitch, it doesn't even allow me to sing in the shower unless she's out of the house. So you can imagine how bad it is. But I certainly think it was great, majestic music that Percy Faith wrote for us, and it certainly embodied the show. He had a great gift for looking at a piece of film and writing music that fit every bit of it. And so we were very lucky to have him as our principal composer.
In the final season, the show changed from being the Virginian to being the Men from Shiloh. Why the change? And also, did you like the change? Were you okay with changing the show from the Virginian to the Men from Shiloh?
Well, we had dropped in the ratings to some extent. I don't think we were ever out of the top 20 in the ratings, but we dropped a little bit, and they felt they'd like us to do some revamping, to give the show a new look. So they came up with that title and the new format, which would be 4 stars with myself and Doug McClure and Stuart Granger and Lee Majors as the 4 stars, and we were going to do 24 shows, so we were all supposed to do 6, I think. Well, it wound up where I did, I think, 12 or 13 of them, and the others were split up evenly or unevenly between the other guys. Doug did a bunch of them, and I don't know how many Stuart Granger or Lee Majors did, because I have not, quite frankly, ever seen the shows they did. But I thought it was a good idea at the time. Everybody did. Everyone was behind it, and we thought it'd be a new look. We got new costumes and new horses, and even changed our handguns. But as it turned out, the audience was looking for the Virginian and couldn't find it, and never heard from the Men from Shiloh, and we went off the air. So sometimes the best laid plans of mice and men often go awry. And that's what happened to us. It was over with. So, in retrospect, it was a lousy idea, but at the time, it seemed like a good idea. Who knew, that we'd had that much problem getting established as a continuation of the same show. So, it just didn't work, Mike. That's all I can say. It didn't work. Not with any longevity. We lasted 1 season, and that was it.
The Virginian lasted 9 seasons, 8 as the Virginian and 1 as the Men from Shiloh. This show is the 3rd longest running Western TV series of all time, behind Gunsmoke and Bonanza. Why was this show so popular?
Well, I think we were able, because of our 90-minute format, to tell interesting, intriguing, complex stories, and usually had a major role for a guest star, a man or a woman, an actor or an actress that should come in and really get their teeth into a fine guest star role. And I think that we were fortunate in that our writers were able to write these wonderful guest star roles, and great and accomplished actors and actresses came from all over the world and played in our show because they wanted to play those roles. And of course, they paid very well, I'm sure. But an actor will walk barefooted over broken glass to play a role that he wants to play. There's a great overwhelming desire by an actor or an actress to work with material that they can respond to and that they have a feel for and that they feel they can accomplish something with. Mm-hmm. And that's what happened with the Virginian. We had Betty Davis and Joan Crawford. We had George C. Scott. We had Colleen Dewhurst. We had Ralph Bellamy. And every morning I'd get up and go down the hill to the studio knowing that I was going to be working with somebody wonderful that day. And of course it brought our acting game up. When you're working with great actors and actresses, you have to be sure to be working on their level, and it kept us constantly on our toes and able to give performances that lasted. I think that's the main reason the show was so popular when it first came out, and it's still popular. It still has a majesty of its own that is a result of those great guest stars coming and interacting with us. Mm-hmm. So it was a perfect storm of good fortune in the Virginian because of our format, the length of time we had to tell a story, and the fact that we had these wonderful people come and play those roles. So that's the size of it right there.
Mm-hmm. During the time you were making these episodes, did you ever think that this show would have the impact that it did? Because obviously you feel it. You have the Virginian posse. You have a very, very loyal fan base in the show. Now with it being on 2 stations and all on DVD, there's a lot of people seeing it now, and it's still popular, like you said. Did you ever think in your wildest dreams when you're making this show that it would still hold up and be popular today?
Well, the brain can only hold so many thoughts at one time. And I was so concentrated on making the show and doing it the best possible way that we could do it, and making it as much of a perfect illusion as we could make it, that I really never thought about the future very much. You have to, and there's no point in, it's like worrying about something. There's an old saying, 90% of what people worry about never happens. Mm-hmm. Well, 90% of what you can speculate about what's going to happen with the show will never happen either. So what you have to do is do your best possible job every single day and every minute and every hour of every day, and let the chips fall where they may. It might have gone off the air and never been heard of again, and I certainly would have had no control over that. And so since I had no control over it, I didn't worry about it. And I couldn't have done it any other way. Mm-hmm. It just so happened that because of all these elements and all this good luck that we had with our format and with our guest stars, we were able to create shows that still seem to have a dynamic interest today, and people are... I know people that watch the show again and again and watch it every day, and if it's the same episode, they're happy to watch it the 3rd or the 15th or the 28th time that they've seen it, and they get something new out of it every time. So how could you ask for any better situation than that? And I certainly can, and I'm so grateful that it all turned out that way.
After the show was canceled, who gave you the news that you weren't going to be making any more episodes?
I don't remember. I imagine my agent. I think my agent contacted me and told me that he had heard from the studio that they were not going to produce it again the following year. I'm sure it was my agent, Herb Gold, that told me that. I'm quite sure it was. I don't specifically remember the situation or the conversation, but I remember that it would have had to have been him that told me, because he was the one who would have been notified. So that's how it works.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. When the show ended, were you sad that the show ended? Because obviously you had been doing it for a long time, 9 seasons. You were getting paid consistently. It was a great job. But at the same time, were you happy that the show was over? Because now, I'm sure back then, you thought, okay, well, now I can go and pursue other roles. I don't have to turn any roles down because they conflict with me being on the Virginian. Were you happy or were you sad when the show ended?
I was both. I was sad that it was over. I would have been happy to continue with it for any number of years into the future. After all, Jim Harness did Gunsmoke for about 23 years, but I was also happy because I anticipated working a great deal in other material, and that never eventuated. It didn't happen. I never was, certainly wouldn't pretend to be happy about that, and I'm not happy about that, but that's the way you have to play the cards you're dealt, and that's the way, those are the cards I was dealt, and I've made the most of it. That's all I can say.
Obviously, compared to what actors are making on TV now, the pay doesn't compare, but for the time, was The Virginian a good paying job?
It was good paying for me. It was great. I was happy with it. I wasn't happy with the amount of money I was making, and I tried to protest a couple of times, but it didn't do much good. So I had to go back at the same rate. But then I had a contract signed, and that was really the thing I should have done. So that's the way it happened. There were others where in television making a lot more money. And in fact, Lee J. Cobb was making a lot more money than I was. But then he had this magnificent name and the achievements that he'd had and the great motion pictures he'd been in. So I never begrudged him any of that, and I'm glad he was able to do it. I wish I'd made more money out of it, but on the other hand, I got the chance to do the show. And like I said, actors will walk over barefoot over broken glass to play a part they wanted to play, and I wanted to play the Virginian very badly, and I'm glad I did. So you can't really put a monetary figure on it. If I was doing the show today, I might be making $1 million an episode, but then that's now, and that was 50 years ago. So you can't compare apples and oranges. Right. You just have to go with the cards you're dealt.
Do you have any items from the show? Guns, hats, stuff like that?
A few pieces of costume and a few artifacts from the show, a couple pairs of boots and so forth that actually worked in the show. And I've got some pants and some jackets. I don't have any of the vests or the red shirts that I wore for 8 years. Those all disappeared over time. I've got one hat from the men from Shiloh that I've still got, and I don't have any of the original hats, unfortunately, but these things just are tools that you use to create the character, and they're not something you put a lot of sentimental value on. I would probably put a lot more sentimental value on them if I had them now than when I didn't, I could have gotten them and didn't bother. So I don't have any regrets about that because that's just something that happened. In fact, I have no real regrets about anything. You don't get to be this age without having some regrets, but most of my things that I wanted to accomplish, and certainly what I wanted to accomplish with the Virginian, I was able to accomplish. So how many people can say that? In my experience, it's a very small slice of humanity that can really be happy with their work and their life's work, and I am. So I'm lucky that way, and in many, many, many other ways. I'm certainly lucky to have such loyal fans and great memories of what we did, and I'm lucky in my personal life to have a woman I love so much and I'm able to stay with and help right now. So I'm a happy man.
This is probably a stupid question, but do you miss playing the Virginian? Do you ever wake up in the morning, get up out of bed, and go, you know what, I wish I was going to set today. I wish we were going to make some more episodes. Do you miss it?
I certainly miss playing the Virginian, and I miss acting in general. I have always been, acting has always been a calling for me. I made a lot of money acting, but I have never really acted for money. I act because I want to act, and because I love acting, and love the feeling of satisfaction that I get from doing a performance well. And that's about all any actor can ask for.
In 1960, there was a show called The Yank. It was a show that was not picked up by a network. There was a pilot filmed, but for whatever reason, the networks didn't pick it up. The show was called The Yank, so I'm just curious, Were you supposed to be the lead in that show?
I was, and we did make a half hour. It was a post-Civil War show. Basically, you could say it was a Western, but it was after the Civil War. There was a Northern Union Army officer who was a doctor by profession, but he had been an artillery officer in the war, and he came back to the South after the Civil War to fulfill what Lincoln said in the second inaugural: "We must bind up the nation's wounds." And most of the doctors in the South had been killed in the conflict. They were out there trying to save lives, and they got blown up themselves. So this character, the Yank, returned to the South after the Civil War to treat the sick and help people who needed medical help, and got into great adventures. And it was a great concept for a show. It was produced by Andrew J. Finnerty, who produced The Rebel, and it was a spin-off of The Rebel. It was done by the same production team, and we had high hopes for it. But that was the year that the major networks, NBC, ABC, and CBS, decided that they were going to do westerns, but they were going to do hour-long westerns instead of half-hour. So we languished in no man's land between the half-hour western and the hour western, and we no studio ever purchased the show. So I was very sad about that. But then it was a blessing in disguise, because if I'd been doing the Yank, I never would have been picked to play the Virginian.
Before you got hired to play the Virginian and before the Yank, were you ever up for any lead role in a Western TV series at that time?
I think I was up for a couple of Western series besides that, but we never got to the point where we actually produced them. The Yank was actually made and was very effective, but it just didn't sell. But I did do one other television series for ABC called Firehouse, and that was a firefighter emergency type situation, half-hour show, and it was quite dreadful. It only lasted 13 shows, and they paid me a lot of money to be in a lot of bad material. I had a wonderful cast and wonderful people to work with, but the scripts were just atrocious. And the producers, in their infinite wisdom, decided that it was, since we were doing a fire show, we should have 3 emergencies in each show. Well, that's 21 minutes, so that's 7 minutes in an emergency. So all you had was a bunch of little bitty people running around, putting out great big fires. You never got a close-up, and you never got the family feeling, or the feeling of identification with the characters that you would in a show such as The Virginian. So I went from the frying pan into the fire, and it went off the air, and I have not been asked to do a series since. So that's the story.
Because there were so many Westerns on TV during that era, did you ever wish that you could play one of those main roles? Was there ever a role where, obviously we know you loved playing the Virginian, but was there another role on TV in a Western during that time period that you would have loved to play? Was there ever a role that you're like, man, I really, really wish I could play that character? You know, there were so many great Western TV series on during that time. Did you ever say to yourself, you know, I really, really want to play that part? Was there ever a role that you wished that you would have gotten or wished they would have offered to you? And if so, what was that role and what show was it on?
Not really.
Oh.
Never. It didn't really cross your mind, because when you're doing a show like Gunsmoke or Have Gun Will Travel or The Lawman or The Rifleman, you try to do your best portrayal of that character. And you certainly don't envy the guys that are playing the continuing characters of the leading roles, because they're, after all, your colleagues and your co-workers, and you have to interact with them, and if they weren't creating wonderful characterizations such as Clint Eastwood's Rowdy Yates and John Russell's Lawman, you wouldn't have a damn thing to work with. So I was always grateful to be on those shows, and certainly admired all the efforts of all those great leading men But I never had that I remember, I never had any particular envy of their being on those shows. I just was hoping I'd get one of my own at some point, and then sure enough, I did. Mm-hmm. So that was the way that worked. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that I think I can speak without fear of contradiction that there are very damn few actors who went around being envious of anybody else's success. You just wanted it. That's the American dream. You see, if Clint Eastwood can be successful, then I can be successful, you know?
Right.
And that's the way you have to think about life as you approach it, because you certainly can't live somebody else's life or play somebody else's role.
Right.
You got to play your own.
You said after the show ended and when you were going around looking for new work, you were typecast as the Virginian. So I'm just curious, why didn't you go over to Europe with guys like Clint Eastwood and Lee Van Cleef and Charles Bronson and some of those other guys who went on to star in spaghetti westerns? Why didn't you go over to Europe in the 70s? Were you ever offered opportunities to go overseas?
No, I wasn't, and if I had been, I would have gone. I just didn't. It wasn't in the mix of the people that were getting those opportunities, and that's just the way it goes. If I had gone, someone else wouldn't have gone, and so they got a chance to go and do those portrayals, and Lee Van Cleef and Clint Eastwood in particular, and I never had anything but admiration and good thoughts about what they were doing. I thought it was wonderful. I wish that I had been included in the bunch, but I wasn't, so that's that. There's nothing you can do about it. You certainly don't want to go around crying over spilt milk, you know.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
that's it. That's my attitude towards that. I wish I had, but I didn't. Nobody ever asked me to do that.
Yeah, it's so strange. You would be a perfect guy for that. Like, it's a no-brainer. I can't believe it. I was looking at your resume and all the things that you've done, and I've noticed some pretty big gaps in between your acting jobs. And I was wondering why didn't anyone just bring him over to Europe? You know, he could have been in there with Eastwood and all those guys.
I guess it just never occurred to anybody, and I had done a couple of shows for Universal after the show was over, and then I've never worked for Universal again since the last one I did, which is a movie of the week for ABC called The Devil and Miss Sarah with Gene Barry and Janice Rule, and I made that out in the Arizona desert out by Lake Powell, Arizona, which is named after the guy who led the party of men through the Colorado River Rapids that was immortalized on film in the picture 10 Who Dared, which I made for Disney. Played the brother of the leader of the expedition and went on to complete that picture. I don't know if you. It was a very good show with Johnson and Brian Keith, and we had a wonderful time making it. And then here I am, many years later, doing The Devil and Miss Sarah out there by Lake Powell, which is named after Captain Powell, who was the leader of the expedition. So it's many coincidences in life, and that's one of them.
Yeah.
Well, listen, Mike, I'm going to have to cut this off here. I've got a bunch of stuff I've got to do this afternoon, but I certainly have enjoyed talking to you. I hope I've given you enough for a good interview.
Oh, you've given me more than enough. This has been an absolute honor and a privilege to talk to you. I've been a fan of you for many, many years, and I've enjoyed your work, and this has been just an amazing hour-plus conversation with you. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it.
My pleasure, and I'll be happy to talk to you again at any time that you want to call up and make arrangements, and we'll do it again one of these days.
Okay.
All right.
You'll be hearing from me.
You be careful, Mike, and take care of yourself, and I wish you the best of luck in everything.